whether David would be surprised. Who won? You were really surprised?
I knew something was up, but I didn't know when or where.
Well, that's what I was telling everybody. Everybody was saying, well, David couldn't possibly fail to miss the posters people put up right in front of his face. And I said, oh, yes, he could. Well, we're glad you're surprised about the event, but it shouldn't come as any surprise to you that so many of your friends and colleagues have come here. Pay attention, David. To express their gratitude to you for the tremendous contributions you've made. We're also here to wish Ursula all the best as both of them begin on their new adventure. We have some other surprises planned for everyone tonight to put everybody in the mood to share their favorite David Berliner stories and reflect on the wild ride we've all enjoyed for the past 4 years. But first, we're going to give you a little bit more time to socialize and enjoy the refreshments, and we'll start the program shortly. Dean David Berliner. At this time, I'm going to turn my name is Gail Hackett, by the way. I am no longer with the College of Education, but I am glad to come back and join people tonight. And right now I'm going to do something that we always tried not to do when I was in the college dean's office, which is turn the program over to Gene Glass.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. This isn't that much. I just saw that it was billed as This Is Your Life, or this is just a little bit of stuff we dug up around the office in the last week or so behind closed doors. And we're going to try to pull this off. Is Chris here somewhere? Hey, Chris, come over. Come over in case we need a backup. Thanks to Ursula and the photo files of the college, we were able to put together some views of David and his life that you may not have seen before.
Use the mic.
I'm not going to talk through it, so that doesn't matter. And you'll have a little trouble seeing, but wait a second.
Nothing. Gene is not saying anything, nor will he say anything. And if he said anything, it wouldn't be important.
Gene, you gotta click it.
That's all right.
Okay.
It's a Krispy Kreme donut is what I did. It's a young man's journey to adequacy. Perhaps I should read. It is a big room, and I hadn't planned on it being quite this big. It says, enough of that music. What is a Berliner anyway? Some kind of jelly donut. This is a few here are old enough to remember the great Kennedy speech at the wall, but no, it's not a jelly donut. It's a man born in the Bronx, a man who long ago embarked on a journey to adequacy. And you think commuting to Ahwatukee is tough. DeWitt Clinton High School, 1955. His nickname was Doodles. Actual fact. these words from the current principal of DeWitt Clinton. You've left an indelible impression on this institution. Plastering, repainting, that'll be $1,235. Ye gods, not in trouble. They're in trouble again. The Stanford years, forever the prodigy, can spot a man like Nate Gage, 25 years, and beat him to baldness. It's just a high forehead.
It is.
At ASU, he distinguished himself in the seminar room with those great mathematical-looking graphs. They're impressive. I'm not sure what they're about. The Arizona years. In '87, lured from the U of A. Fly casting or bottom trolling, not sure which. Publication in 1995, The Manufactured Crisis, hailed as a classic around the world and at home. And the ACLU loved it. The famous Tribune, ooh, that didn't get a laugh, huh? The famous Tribune cartoon, for which the cartoonist was required to show up at a carnival and be dunked in water. In '96, plus or minus, Berliner was named Regents Professor, recognizing accomplishments in research, teaching, and service. And for balancing heavy building ornaments on his head. I thought I saw Milt here. Never one to squander the public purse. Upon being appointed dean in '97, Berliner had his publicity photos taken at Olin Mills. With coupons from Milt Glick. Ching. With a steady hand on the tiller. I'm from Nebraska. I don't know a tiller from a wheel. I don't even know what a tiller is. He piloted the ship of the college through choppy waters of Arizona politics. In '99, the provost granted a leave to spend at Columbia University, where he held sway in the fashionable intellectual salons of New York City. It says Ernest goes to New York City. Back at ASU, Joan Sherwood, our PR person, worked hard to scotch rumors that the dean was half in the bag all the time. Soon critics admitted he was half in the bag half of the time. One more for the road. Forgive me, Ursula, forgive me. Even Clinton-esque photo ops couldn't hide the fact that 4 years in the dean's office was placing a strain on a storybook marriage. Yeah, the Great Gatsby. David and Ursula had to travel all the way to Lithuania to find a priest to find a priest who would preside at a Jewish Puerto Rican renewal of vows. I pledge by all that is holy that I will never again be a dean. He stepped on many little people on his climb to the top. But they didn't mind it. It was all for public education. He was only thinking of us, the little people. Kidding aside, we love you, David. And although we'll always have you around, we'll miss the pride we felt knowing that we were working for Berliner. From all your friends.
Wait, there's more. Thanks, Gene. That was great. Are you okay, David? At this point in the program, what we'd like to do is... and for those of you who only know Gene through his commentaries on the paper, now you know why we tolerate him, right? We have invited a few people to say a few words each about David. Milklick, our provost.
Thank you, Gail, and that's a pretty hard act to follow. That's the closest Gene has come to political correctness. I'm going to tell you a true story, and that is we suggested that Gene get some media training. This is true. And I understand that we brought in some consultants and that they worked with Gene, and they hoped that they'd shared a little insight for him. And I ran into him a few weeks later, and I said, Gene, I was so impressed and pleased that he was willing to actually go through a training session. And I said, Gene, how was it? And he said it was really pretty good. It was quite helpful. And I said, well, what did you get out of it? He said, they told me to grow a beard because I'd look friendlier. And that's the story of Gene's beard. It would be really funny if that weren't a true story. I think it's very hard to follow Gene at a time like this, and it really is a special, bittersweet moment for us as David steps back to the faculty. I have to say I didn't prepare the right talk. First, I never prepare a talk, but I didn't prepare the right talk because I understood this was the kickoff for David's fundraising as part of his campaign to become superintendent. And David, it would be worth the price of admission, so you name your price. I first met David on the provost search, and he was one of the several people on that committee who really gave me the sense that this was a place to come to, and I've not been disappointed. So I really seriously found David one of the particular reasons that I chose to move here from Iowa State. I had known his co-author, who wasn't his co-author at the time, Bruce Biddle. When David published, along with Bruce, The Manufactured Crisis, I read it, and I talked to David about it, and I said, David, I really like this book. I think you've really said some things that need to be said. The polemic, however, knowing Bruce as well as I do, the polemic obviously was Bruce's. That was before I got to know David. I find that he and Bruce match each other well in polemicism. But several times early in my time here, problems came up. Sometimes personnel problems, sometimes curricular problems, where I knew I really needed somebody both to give me advice and guide me on how to address these problems in the least destructive way. And so I would call David, and we'd go for a walk and have a hot dog, which neither of our wives approve of, I should tell you. And it's right out here, this little man on roller skates out here that sells hot dogs. But when David, not only did he give you advice, often he would say, give me a day and I'll solve the problem. And somehow, without any fingerprints, the problem went away. And that is really one of the things about David. He has always put this university and its health above his own personal agendas. And I think that that really is something very special. When I talked about who should be the interim dean and eventually the dean, I met with several faculty, and consistently there were two names that came up for internal candidates, David and Gail. And David lobbied me why Gail should be interim dean, and Gail lobbied me why David should be interim dean, and they both meant it. And candidly, I decided that Gail would be able to do all the work if David were dean, and if Gail were dean, she wouldn't have anybody to do all the work for her. So I figure I got a twofer there. David challenges each of us. He challenges us intellectually, he challenges us on philosophy, he challenges us on policy, and the nice thing about David is you don't have to agree with him to be his friend. You just have to be willing to argue the case on an intellectual basis. David brings an intellectual rigor to the college, to the campus, to the university that really raises all of us from what we are. He lifts us all. And David does not expect to win every argument. He does expect to be listened to. And I find that David wins more arguments than he loses. And in his role as dean, in the Dean's Council, he has brought a credibility for the college that will serve the college for many years to follow. I once told an alumni group from the College of Education that somehow when David became dean, a wind came along and blew a cloud away, and the sun shined into the college, and you could feel tangibly the good feeling and the willingness of people to work. In David's first meeting with the faculty, I had given David a series of things that were important to get done for the college and for the university to receive proper recognition as being the best college of education in the state. And at his first meeting with his faculty, he assured them they were all working hard and doing good. And then he said, but the provost gave me a series of things I need to do. And so I'm asking each of you to tithe, to do another 10% over what you're doing. And that tithing is how we address these issues that have been placed in front of me. And I think the level of respect that David had has allowed many of those things to be done. David is intellectually sound, he has strong views, and he is infinitely compassionate. He cares desperately about the children of this state and this country. And I think if one was to eulogize him, that would be the words. He cares about the children of this state. David, we're sorry we're going to lose you as dean, but we're delighted to gain you back as a faculty member. And I know you're delighted to gain back your freedom. And I think Ursula's glad that you're gaining back your freedom. Ursula, we assume you'll work just as hard after you retire, and we'll miss your daily efforts for us, but still expect many. In all sincerity, David has been one of the wonderful appointments I believe this university has made, and we are all better for his service, and we're sorry you're dropping out.
I've told that story Milt just told about But the ending for me is that I always thought that I won when David got appointed. Now I hear the truth, right? We'd like to ask one of our faculty members who served in the college administration and who's now Dean of the Graduate College, Bianca Bernstein, to come say a few words.
Well, like the rest of us, this is a bittersweet moment, and I could talk lots and have lots of good stories to tell about David and Ursula as friends and colleagues and associates over the years, but I thought I'd talk a little bit about Dean David from a dean's perspective. To summarize it at the beginning, I would say that David has created havoc ever since he's been in the dean's office, and I'm going to explain what that havoc stands for. The H is for humor. I think of all our deans, David can be counted on regularly to provide the light touch, but with a serious underpinning to the story. And God knows we all need humor in the things that we deal with all the time in these positions. And so we're grateful to David for the H. We're also grateful to David for the A, which there are lots of A's I can think of, but probably the strongest one that stands out in my mind is his advocacy. And his advocacy for the college, of course, but more important, his advocacy for education as a whole. I think we all agree that he's a national spokesperson for education. And to have a national spokesperson located at ASU is a real benefit to all of us. And we've always been proud to have David be the voice of education located right here at this university. The V in havoc is for values, and there is no question that among hundreds of people that I have seen in administrative positions, David is my role model for operating as an administrator based on real values and principles. And those values are again based on general values of education, on the place of education in society, on his democratic principles, and the other advocacy that I think that he represents that is unusual, I think, among administrators, not necessarily at ASU, but nationally, is his reliance on data to support his positions. These are not blind values and blind passions. These are always based on thoughtful commentary based on all the wonderful research that he and others have done in the field. And that's, again, important for his credibility and also for our credibility as a university. There are lots of O's, but I would say his originality stands out. One wonderful thing I appreciate about colleagues is when they say something that I would never have thought of and no one else would ever have thought of. And David can always be counted on to take that original perspective and to convey it in a meaningful and convincing way. The C in havoc is for charisma, and I think there isn't a person in this room who would not agree that he is one of the most charismatic and effective individuals that any of us has ever known, and to have that kind of a person be a leader of a college is that much more of a special role that we have experienced. But besides creating havoc since he's been dean, he's also done it with gusto and Pepsi, and let me explain Pepsi. The P is for passion. Again, I think there are all kinds of people with administrative and managerial skills in the world, and there are some people with principles, and there are some people who do both of those at the same time, but there are really not very many people who do it with true passion. And again, I think you would all agree that when David sets out a set of guidelines or principles or visions or perspectives, that it's really, you can always feel the passion. You can always feel his emotional meaning that he attaches to whatever that is. Also in Pepsi, the E stands for excellence. I think that more than anything, he's one of those rare individuals who always always takes the higher road in terms of what eventually is good for the college, what is good for students, and what is good for education. And that always underlies all of his other things. The second P in Pepsi, and this is another rare treat, I think, among deans, and that he is an administrator who understands that, just as I always say as a counseling psychologist, that it's really impossible to be impartial when one is helping other people. So David has shown that it's also impossible to be an effective administrator in such a highly visible field and not be political. And I think he's done us a service. It's created a lot of anxiety in some and tension at times, and a lot of attention to the college that maybe he, in some mornings, would prefer not to have had placed on the college. But on the other hand, I think it is an important statement that people at a major university like ASU have a pulpit in a sense, and we do need to represent our distinctive fields, our disciplines, our points of view, and our representatives as part of the intellectual part of society to make a difference. And so, yes, this is a political role, being an administrator in a major public university these days. The C in Pepsi is compassion. Notice I say C because, and not S, and that's because I really didn't have the good phonics education that I should have had to be a fully functioning human being. The C stands for compassion, and I think the issues of equity and compassion for the child, for the parent, for the less privileged parts of our society come through in every single position David ever takes on anything. And again, it used to be, at least in my good old days at Berkeley in the 60s, that wasn't so unusual. But it's getting to the point where even in universities, that's becoming less prominent than some of it was like. So I always value David's championing the position of those folks who are less privileged than some of the rest of us. And finally, the I in Pepsi, misspelled Pepsi, is for inclusion. And I think inclusion is also one of David's fine points in life, and that he's talking not only about the less privileged members of our society, but also all kinds of faculty from all different eras and all kinds of students with their various perspectives, and all the members of our local community who wish to participate somehow in the preparation of teachers and the next generation of our community members. And so for all those ways of creating havoc and having Pepsi, thank you, David.
Thank you, Bianca. Next, we'd like to hear from our Associate Dean for Teacher Education and Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Nick Appleton, if Nick is here. Nick, you are never at a loss for words. Get up here. I've never seen this happen, ever! For those of you who don't know how momentous an occasion this is, Nick's the one we always had to put last on the agenda of any meeting and then all start leaving, or else he would go on and on and on and on. Elsie Moore, Director of our Division of Psychology and Education, does have a few words, right? Elsie, where's Elsie? There she is.
Hi. I guess it was last week David penned me. He gave me my 20-year pen. I've been at ASU 20 years. Of course, I came here as but a teenager. But The reason I point out, the reason I mention that I've been here 20 years is to say that I've also been in the College of Education for 20 years. So needless to say, I've had a lot of experiences with different deans. And I think I can say with some authority that David has taken us, or as far as I'm concerned, he has taken us to places that were promised to me the day I was hired. We always had a wonderful faculty in the College of Education, and each new dean had a new plan for how they were going to marshal all that talent and move us forward. And they would come in, shake it up, and move on. And there we were, picking up the pieces, still talented, still ambitious, but no vision, no leadership. And so things got shook up, and then they say, David Berlin is your interim dean. I thought, good, at least he's one of us, okay? One of us, meaning he knows what we do, he's been doing it with us. So let's see what happens. Who could have ever dreamed that one of us would make such an outstanding administrator? So, in the 4 years of David's tenure, I am extremely proud of how we have evolved as a college. And we have tremendous momentum that he has created, and so I think he leaves the college in a wonderful position for the next dean, assuming he or she does not come in and shake it up and do something weird. David, thank you for everything.
Terry Kennedy. Terry is the administrative associate to the dean, and David's, where is Terry? There you are. I'll let her talk. David wouldn't know where to go next without Terry.
Thank you, Gail. It's very intimidating to follow such prestigious speakers, but I've got evidence. And I'm going to read that to you. For those who don't know me, I'm Terry Kennedy, and I've held the position of assistant to the dean since 1988. So that means I've assisted 4 deans over 13 years. One of the reasons I think I've been in this position so long is my ability to keep confidences. So when I was asked to say some things about working with David, at first I didn't think I should talk about and reveal some of his best kept secrets. But then I remembered once when we first started working together and were discussing confidential mail, he said to open everything because he had no secrets. Well, by the end of this program, David, you will definitely not have any secrets. Back in 1997, after a month or so of being deanless, Provost Glick made the announcement that David Berliner, otherwise known as the wise guy from the Bronx, was going to be our interim dean. By David's own admission, it took several decades to convince his father he had potential, but it only took 4 years for everyone to come to the realization that this faculty member and defender of public education made a pretty good dean. We didn't want him to leave, but as he said, I promised 4 years of my life, not my whole life. So 4 years and a whole bunch of parking citations have come and gone since that day in January of 1998, when Provost Glick made a second announcement that David Berliner was chosen as Dean of the College of Education by a 95% vote of the faculty. Going back to the very first day David was appointed interim dean, I remember how nervous the dean's office staff was about having a new boss and a new personality to contend with. As I left the office to run an errand that first day, I glanced to my right down the hall just in time to see David rounding the corner. We stopped, we stared, then like in slow motion, we moved toward each other. My hair was flowing. David's hair, well, he had a lot more hair 4 years ago. Finally, a step away, then David embraced me and wailed, "You are going to help me, aren't you?" As the movie and the song go, he had me from hello. For faculty who go into administration, one of the hardest things they must learn is that while they are in office from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., their weekdays are no longer their own. They belong to all the people who want a piece of their time. When David first came on board, he was more than happy to meet with everyone and anyone he met on the street, on the plane, at conferences, in the hall, in the men's room, and driving on I-10 during traffic jams. I had my work cut out for me in the beginning trying to get him to say those 9 important words. Please call my assistant to set up a meeting. Instead, I spent time on the phone trying to accommodate the people David told to stop by anytime and those who called for legitimate appointment time. I finally had to sit him down and threaten to take his little black appointment book away and explain to him the dangers of making his own appointments. Of course, about 2 years into the deanship, he no longer gave out his time so freely, and he let me do it for him. But I guess out of habit, every year he bought another one of those darn little appointment books. Another area David had trouble in the beginning with is delegating work to others. Being the independent sort he is, he wanted to do everything, and after a while, trying to do everything became overwhelming. I had to keep reminding him that whenever something came up he didn't have time to do, he needed to delegate it to Gail Hackett, Nick Appleton, and Jean Glass. As a result, Gail got so busy she left the college to become vice provost. Nick learned diplomacy when dealing with large groups of women's organizations, and Jean developed a sensitive side when dealing with legislators. So it all worked out. Another aspect of my job is to help to keep the dean organized. So I have to mention that despite stern lectures, lighthearted joking, pleading, time out in the corner, I was never able to teach David to quit piling his work all over his office. I could not break him of the habit of using his chairs as open filing cabinets or the floor as a work surface. To teach him a lesson one day when he was off giving lectures to 5 major cities in 5 days, I cleaned his office. It took 2 days before the top of his desk and the surface of the floor was visible again. In the end, I had a ton of filing and a load of wash. When David returned, his scream could be heard throughout the Payne building, causing building occupants to gather out in the breezeway thinking the fire alarm went off. After that first cleaning, someone mentioned that I should go see his faculty office on the 2nd floor. My screams sent everyone out in the breezeway again. It took me a couple months to get David to agree to let me go up in his office and to tidy up a bit. It took me 4 days to clean the office, and I had the custodian complaining to me about the fire danger I was creating in the hallway. On the day I took David upstairs to see the office, I had Sally standing by to call 911 just in case we needed help. But after he came to, he kind of liked the idea there was a desk in the office after all. I am confident I can speak for everyone in the dean's office and in the college that we're going to miss that big kid from the Bronx. We'll miss all the stories he told, such as the recent one where David was planning to give a big speech in Flagstaff. David was at his house in Sedona preparing for the speech, and just before leaving for Flagstaff, he realized he didn't have a tie at the Sedona house. So he went next door to the neighbor to borrow a tie, and the neighbor told him he threw his ties out 12 years ago when he retired. But he still managed to find one tie that David was able to use. And what did it matter that it didn't match what he was wearing? We will miss the fact that David Berliner is a human being who treats everyone with respect and kindness, from the custodian to the staff to his colleagues. He understands the importance of giving time off to spend with their families or go on vacation or to be with a sick child, things he also did. He garners a great deal of respect from everyone because he treats each person like they mean something to him. Best of luck, David, a wonderful sabbatical, and call me when you need your office cleaned.
Terry talks like she just cleaned his office once. I learned to disappear on the day she's been in his office and he came back after a cleaning. Next on the agenda is Professor and Senator Jay Blanchard.
Well, I'd like to announce my candidacy for the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Well, while it may not be premature, there is an opening down there for a couple of days. Well, I guess this is the best of times and the worst of times for David. I've known David since he first came to ASU. I guess it's the best of times because he survived 4 years with that circus we call a College of Education faculty. I guess, however, it's the worst of time because we lose an advocate with a pulpit for public education. On a serious note, make no mistake, public education is under attack. It's under attack across the country. I think of a cute little story that seems to summarize up that attack. It seems that the Lord came down to earth one day and was walking along a road and came to a man who happened to be crying, and he asked the man, "Sir, why are you crying?" And the man said, "Can't you see I'm blind?" The Lord said, "Well, I can take care of that," and touched the man. The man had sight and walked off. The Lord walked down the road a little bit further and came to a man that was crying, and he said, "Sir, why are you crying?" The man said, "Can't you see I'm crippled?" And the Lord touched the man, and the man wasn't crippled anymore and walked off. Then he came down the road, the man was sitting on a rock, the man was crying. He leaned down to the man and said, "Man, why are you crying?" The man looked up at him and said, "I'm a public school teacher." With that, the Lord sat down and started crying with him. Thanks a lot for being here, Dave, and keep the voice for public education.
I'm next on the agenda. This is true. I can't say what I'd like to say, so I'll have to make things up here. I didn't prepare formal remarks. I just have a series of things that I'd like to share with you that I remember about working in the dean's office with David. First, I remember talking with David in my office right after we heard that our dean was stepping down, and David and I were having a talk about who would be the next dean, and I remember the growing sense of excitement I had when I realized that, in fact, David was seriously considering accepting the job as dean. And then I remember how good I felt when Milt actually made that initial appointment. I remember our initial days in the dean's office, getting lots of support from the staff, the faculty, and the students, but not having a clue about what we were doing. David never acted like he didn't have a clue, though. That was good. I remember meeting Joe Moeller, our former head of development, and finally figuring out who the big tall guy was and what he did. I remember parties, lots of parties at David's with the wonderful view and the wine, many bottles of wine. I remember David breezing into the office after being on a trip for a week, however, traveling the whole time, and coming into the office as if nothing fazed him at